Good morning. This is Mike Tingatella, and we are going to be doing Why I Believe Part 2. Last week we talked about the fact that Peter in 1 Peter 3:15 admonished us to always be prepared to give a reason for the hope that we have and to do so with humility and grace. This series will be about that defense. We spoke last week about the fact that God has revealed himself to the world in three ways. First, through the creation. That is called general revelation. Second, through the scriptures, through the sending of prophets and emissaries and the recording of their work, but most especially through the work of Jesus Christ on the cross. And third, he reveals himself on a continuing basis through the Holy Spirit, working in the lives of individual people, revealing to them the meanings of the scriptures and the passages that Jesus himself gave us. Today, we're going to focus exclusively on general revelation, the revelation left through the creation. This is what the prophet David said when he said that the heavens and the earth testify to his glory, and what Paul meant when he said, what may be known about God is manifest to them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that have been made, even by his eternal power and Godhead, so that mankind is without excuse. If we were walking through a museum and we came across a painting, we thought, of a kind of a landscape that is modern in structure, a brown background with some streaks of green, and if we saw some red speckles in it and maybe even some diamond-like speckles around it, we may look at it and say, I wonder what the artist had in mind here. What was he meaning? And we, just as we said that, possibly to our spouse, a curator comes through and said, oh, you missed the point. There was no artist here. This painting, this piece of art was created by nature naturally, by a piece of canvas that was blown by the wind across the deserts and picking up the brown background in that manner on the soil. And then when it got up to Camp Verde, it picked up these chlorophyll streaks of green, and the red tones are from the red cliffs up near Sedona and Flagstaff. And finally around Feldspar, it picked up these little speckles of what almost looks like diamonds. And you reacted and said, wow, I never realized that. And so as you move down through the museum, you come across the Mona Lisa and even the three-dimensional sculpture, the La Pieta. And when you look at those pieces of art, it was manifestly evident to you that this did not happen from random means, not through any canvas picking up these kinds of images, and not from a log being chipped away to make the La Pieta sculpture. No, because of the organized complexity in the picture of Mona Lisa and in the statue of Mary holding the broken body of her son, you know that this did not happen from random causes. And the reason that you know it intuitively is because you know that unless acted upon by an exterior force, random processes always produce random results, not organized complexity. And when we look around us at our world, at the people and the animals and the organisms in it and the universe in general, we see organized complexity of a major degree. Consider the finely tuned force of gravity that holds worlds together. Any stronger or weaker, our universe would not be hospitable for life. Consider the Big Bang or creation moment, which if the expansion force were the slightest amount smaller or larger, our universe either would have flown apart before planets and suns and moons could have formed, or it would have collapsed back upon itself in a gigantic cataclysmic finale. It wasn't, and it didn't, because the force was just right. Consider the beautiful symmetry of plants absorbing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen in the photosynthesis process into the atmosphere, while animals and people breathe in oxygen and release carbon dioxide, so that our beautiful biosphere remains perfectly in balance. Consider the unique characteristics of the water molecule. Most substances, when they get colder, when they freeze, they shrink, they condense. Water does exactly the opposite. Water expands. That's why when you drop an ice cube into a glass of water, it floats to the top. Consider what would have happened if water, like all other substances, got more dense. Well, during the cold ages, during the ice ages, during winter for that matter, ice, when it formed on the surface, would sink to the bottom, always exposing new surface, freezing over eventually completely, killing any life forms in the water, in the lakes, and in the oceans. But that's not what happened. Because of this unique characteristic of water, the ice forms a buffer layer on top, leaving a warmer layer underneath to allow fish and other vegetation and animals to continue to live. Amazing. Consider the 23-degree tilt in our planetary axis of rotation. This is what that little tilt is what produces our 4 seasons. The side that's further away from the sun experiencing winter, and the southern hemisphere in this particular orientation being closer to the sun, and as a result producing summer. And as the Earth moves around the sun, we get a reversal of those tilts, and we get the 4 seasons. And what does the seasons do? The seasons produce weather patterns which distribute life-giving water around our world. Without that beneficial tilt, we would have permanently cold, permanently hot, permanently wet, and permanently arid parts to our planet, hardly hospitable for a robust, life-giving ecosystem. Consider the presence of DNA in human beings and in other life forms. In humans, in every cell of our body, we have a strand of DNA which contains over 2 billion words of structured information in the form of 4 amino acids that govern the operation of our cellular reproduction and manage the operations of our complex autonomous systems. When we sleep, we don't have to think about how many beats per minute our heart should beat. We don't have to think about how often we should breathe. The autonomic system does that for us because it's been pre-programmed for us. In his book, Bill Gates wrote in the book, The Road Ahead, DNA is a magnificent computer program, but one that is far more advanced and complex than anything we have ever attempted. Bill Gates was aware that coded, structured information never arises from random causes, how can anyone not see the hand of a creator in it? In sexual reproduction, there is a lock and key mechanism that prevents cross-species procreation. There is a chemical code on the head of the sperm which is covered by an enzyme. And when it reaches the outer fringes of the ovum, the female egg, another enzyme on the surface of the egg dissolves the enzyme covering the chemical code in the sperm head. When that code is revealed, it is inserted into a lock on the ovum, on the egg, and unless that code matches exactly, it will not allow entry. That is why feline animals cannot reproduce with canines. It is why apes cannot reproduce with humans. And all of the other species require the exact species code in order for reproduction to occur. One has to ask, if species were intended to randomly evolve across species lines, then why and how would such a complex mechanism develop? There are so many other things that make our world so unique and so hospitable for life and our universe, that our universe seems to have been designed with such wisdom in mind. In the 1989 edition of the World Treasury of Physics, Astronomy, and Mathematics, Dr. Fred Hoyle, a noted British astronomer and mathematician, was quoted as follows: "Would you not say to yourself, some super-calculating intellect must have designed the properties of the carbon atom? Otherwise, the chance of my finding such an atom through the blind forces of nature would be utterly minuscule." Of course you would. A common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has tinkered with physics as well as chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from these facts seem so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. He also said that nothing has so shaken his atheism as this conclusion. Indeed. In philosophy, there is a principle called Occam's razor. Simply stated, it says that the simplest solution to a question or a quandary is usually the truest, the best solution. And so applying this principle, when we ask why the universe and people in it seem to be so wisely designed, the answer is quite simply because it was designed. There are two other ways that God has revealed himself to the world, as we talked about last week. The special revelation given to us in the Bible and the continuing revelation of the Holy Spirit. And we will cover those in subsequent weeks. And so I hope this is helpful to you. It may be something that you may want to watch a couple of times to get full grasp of and to understand why David and Paul pointed to general creation, general revelation, as giving us the answers that we need to know that there is in fact a great power at work in our universe. So I'll suggest to you again that you look to my website, www.michaeljtingatella.com, and take a look at some of the other recommended resources and books and videos that are available there that may be helpful to you. I hope that you have a good week. I hope that you stay safe during these difficult, trying times, and I hope that you will join me again next week for part 3. See you then.